Approaching James at reception, Diane noted his barely there greeting and the shaky hands that screamed, "I've had a rough night." A handshake later, and she was hit with a wave of alcohol fumes strong enough to sanitize her hands. Once in her office, James launched into his grievances like he was auditioning for a role in a drama series. "What were you thinking, meddling in our marriage?" he bellowed. Diane, channeling her inner Zen master, urged him to tone it down, pointing out the obvious: he had done a spectacular job of wrecking his marriage without any external assistance. And just like that, James turned into a human insult machine, hurling every unflattering word in his vocabulary. Diane, meanwhile, mentally prepared herself for what felt like an upcoming role in a soap opera, minus the dramatic background music. Attempting to soothe James was like trying to calm a storm with a whisper, utterly futile. When he suddenly morphed into a human octopus and grabbed Diane, she unleashed her secret weapon, the manicured claws of justice, giving him a scratch he wouldn't forget. Just as he was about to escalate to a slap, Diane's colleagues, acting like the Avengers, burst through the door, their timing as impeccable as a pizza delivery guy in a sitcom. Security swooped in, grabbing James by the pants as if participating in a bizarre tug-of-war, escorting him out with a flair that would make bouncers proud. They issued a stern warning that sounded more like a parental, "Don't make me turn this car around," threatening police action if he as much as sneezed in their direction. James, however, radiated rage like a toddler denied candy, seemingly indifferent to their threats. In response, Diane did the only logical thing: she phoned Alice with the urgency of a gossip columnist breaking a scandal, advising a security update to repel the human storm known as James. They treated his potential arrival like an unwanted sequel, ensuring not even a Hollywood disguise could sneak him past the gates. Alice, turning into a DIY detective, printed James's Facebook photo for security, making his face more famous than a celebrity mugshot. True to their new role as bouncers at club office, security called Alice to report they had thwarted James's incognito attempt, sending him away like a rejected contestant on a reality show. In a move straight out of a family sitcom, Diane enlisted her youngest brother as an honorary bodyguard, plotting a strategic retreat to Fortress Diane. She even met Tony for dinner, where she unloaded the saga of her days, turning their meal into an episode of Dramas and Dinners. Post-dinner, Tony played the knight in shining armor, ensuring Diane made it safely inside her castle, probably checking under the bed and in the closets for boogeymen or, worse, James. Tony, playing his role as the perfect gentleman, escorted Diane to her door with a kiss that could star in its own romantic movie, then sauntered back to his car. Diane, meanwhile, turned into a part-time spy, peeking through the window to ensure Tony wasn't ambushed by James, who might have fancied a late-night creep fest on the property. Inside, she found Alice camped out in the living room like she was staking out for the latest tech release, laptop in tow, eager for the scoop on Diane's date. After a tactical degrime in the shower, Diane joined Alice for a debrief, their conversation as sparkling as a sitcom exchange. They enjoyed a moment of happiness, a rare commodity in their recent drama-filled days. Faith, not wanting to miss out on the latest episode of As Diane's World Turns, had called earlier, her curiosity meter peaking. Diane planned to return Faith's call from the safety of her office fortress the next day, probably to ensure James hadn't tapped their home lines in his newfound role as a love life saboteur. Meanwhile, Faith's dad was orchestrating an intervention at James's parents' place, a meetup more anticipated than a season finale cliffhanger. Tony, doubling down on his charm offensive, sent Diane flowers with a message that could melt even the coldest of hearts, thanking her for a dinner that evidently scored high on the romance scale. He then upped the ante with a surprise dinner, enlisting Alice as his accomplice in romance, turning a simple Friday into an episode of The Bachelor, Diane's edition. The evening at Serena was like stepping into a painting, with Kenyan art setting the scene for romance. Tony, ever the gentleman, played chair maitre d' for Diane, their evening unfolding like a well-scripted play, complete with a wine list cameo. As the night wrapped up, Tony once again ensured Diane's safe return to her abode, their evening ending on a high note with a group chat that probably required its own popcorn. Alice, half joking, inquired about Tony's market availability, hinting at a desire for a spin-off series starring Tony's hypothetical, equally charming brother. After a wine-fueled debrief that felt like a scene from a chic flick, they called it a night, dreams likely filled with romantic gestures and the hope that Tony might just clone himself for the single population's sake. Tony, consistent in his charm, called to say goodnight, cementing his status as the lead in Diane's romantic comedy. On Saturday, with James out of the picture and gallivanting around Karen, Diane and Alice decided to seize the day with the enthusiasm of kids on a sugar rush. They hit the shops. In a bid for a scenery change that afternoon, they craved some adventure and settled on a Nyamachoma spot, because nothing screams weekend vibes like the allure of grilled meat. Without Faith in tow, since she was off in Karen probably dodging drama like it was her job, they plunged into the feast solo. But then, Tony rang, tossing a hello into their day like a surprise plot twist in a soap opera. Diane, with Alice frantically signaling in the background like a third base coach giving signs, extended the invite. Tony, seizing the opportunity like a knight in shining armor, but probably in jeans, rallied his crew for a mini soiree. Alice's joy was palpable, her excitement levels hitting "I just won the lottery" highs as one of Tony's friends entered the scene, looking like he'd walked straight out of a romance novel, tall, dapper, and smooth-talking, the kind you assume must have a CGI team behind him because real life just doesn't produce that kind of perfection. Diane caught Alice's not-so-subtle gawking and delivered a toe-crushing reality check, whispering "stop drooling" like she was sharing state secrets. Their giggles, probably registered on the Richter scale. Mr. Dreamy, however, seemed to only have eyes for Alice, making every address to the group seem like a personal serenade. Their conversation zigzagged from politics to the mysteries of life, with laughter serving as the main course. The chat eventually took a dive into the realm of innuendo, turning them all into giggling teenagers, while the waiter turned 50 shades of red. Every order came with a side of double entendre, making the meal an unforgettable mix of delicious and hilariously scandalous. Diane cornered Tony for some intel on his pals as they ventured to the car under the guise of shawl retrieval, a classic move. They both couldn't help but notice the sparks flying between Alice and Robert, reminiscent of a live wire meeting a puddle. Tony painted Robert as the globe-trotting bachelor, the kind who's seen more airport lounges than wedding chapels. Apparently, he'd been so caught up jet-setting with his old international company that the concept of settling down was more foreign to him than the countries he visited. Recently, he switched gears to a smaller, yet still globe-spanning firm, probably thinking smaller company, smaller travel radius? As the evening wrapped up, Alice and Robert did the modern dance of number swapping. Robert, channeling his inner Casanova, dropped the timeless line, "Do you mind if I call you?" To which Alice, fluttering back to her teen years faster than a time machine could manage, responded, "That will be fine." It was a scene so sweet, diabetics were warned to look away. As they zoomed off in their car, Diane, ever the gossip columnist, nudged Alice, "I caught Robert asking for your digits." Alice rolled her eyes, "Oh, he'll call, all right, when pigs fly business class." Men always promise to ring but end up as silent as a mime in a library. Despite their skepticism, the day wrapped up on a high note, and they hit the hay as happy as clams at a seafood festival. Back in Nakuru, Faith and her entourage wrapped up their powwow with the elders in record time, making a beeline back home. When pressed on her next move, Faith declared she'd rather attend a porcupine petting zoo than go back to her husband. She'd brought along photographic evidence of the love marks her husband had gifted her, dark reminders that no amount of concealer could hide. Her mom, doubling as her fashion advisor, vetoed the makeup cover-up strategy. James's uncle and dad were as let down as a kid who discovers there's no Santa, agreeing that Faith had every right to call it quits on the marriage Olympics if she wasn't feeling the team spirit. James, meanwhile, was the embodiment of despair, head in hands, giving off vibes sadder than a wet sock at a dance party. As Faith's squad made their exit, James remained seated, marinating in what looked suspiciously like tears, proving that sometimes, karma does indeed take the express lane. Faith likened their silent journey back to Nakuru to a mime convention on wheels. They slept, they woke, and not a word was passed between them. Once back, they declared the coast clear, and Alice was free to fly the coop. However, in a plot twist, she dialed up her cousin for a temporary roomie gig while he cooked up his latest business scheme. Diane's mission to retrieve her offspring from her folks took a detour when her parents pulled a gotcha moment, announcing an impromptu Mombasa vacation for the grandkids. Diane, unable to play the villain in their beach-bound dreams, played Santa instead, packing their bags for a seaside adventure, sans her. With the kids off to Mombasa, Diane invited Tony over for an evening sans children, turning her home into a pop-up bistro. Just as she was setting the scene for a culinary masterpiece, Tony made his grand entrance, armed with dual wine options like a sommelier ready for battle, covering all potential meat contingencies. "Hi gorgeous," Tony greeted, upping the charm as he entered. He came bearing gifts of grape, red and white, to match Diane's mystery menu. In the kitchen, they slipped into a cozy domestic dance, Tony playing sommelier while Diane plated up a feast fit for royalty, or at least a very hungry couple. On the menu was roast chicken, its potato sidekicks, and veggies sautéed to perfection, followed by an apple crumble encore with vanilla ice cream that threatened to steal the show. Tony, embodying the spirit of leave no dish behind, bravely went for seconds, navigating the tightrope between satisfaction and bursting at the seams, managing a triumphant nibble of dessert despite proclaiming a dessert compartment crisis. Post-dinner, Tony turned into the cleanup night, bravely facing the dishwasher while leaving the pots and pans for the house help, who was probably sharpening her scrubbing skills in anticipation. They then migrated to the living room, setting the scene with Kenny G's saxophone serenading them into comfort on the couch. They chatted away into the night, until Tony had to pry himself away, probably fearing he'd turn into a pumpkin if he stayed past midnight. Diane was on cloud nine, convinced Tony was chivalry personified, especially since his goodnight kiss was lighter than a feather on a diet. She watched his car vanish like a magician's final act, half expecting a puff of smoke. Monday hit Diane like a caffeine withdrawal headache, with the day zooming past in a blur of busyness. She worked through lunch with the stealth of a ninja, her diet reduced to biscuit nibbles, her version of fine dining under pressure. That evening, too wiped to socialize or even summon the energy to browse online, she rustled up a sirloin steak with veggies and chips, her own version of a Michelin star meal for the exhausted. Just as she was about to nod off in front of the TV, the phone rang with the subtlety of a foghorn, jolting her back to reality. It was Faith, initiating a three-way gossip conference with Alice. Faith dropped the news bomb that her dad had played 6 degrees of separation to land her an interview with the United Nations, thanks to a friend's daughter. She announced her Thursday arrival in Nairobi like a celebrity making a tour stop. With Alice's home turning into a mini kindergarten, Diane, playing the hostess with the mostest, insisted Faith crash at her pad. Their chat meandered around everything but the elephant in the room, Alice's budding romance with Robert. Alice and Robert, The Lunch Chronicles. Since their first encounter, Alice and Robert had ventured on 2 lunch dates, each one probably more thrilling than finding an extra fry at the bottom of the bag. Alice, caught between excitement and the fear of replaying past heartaches, decided to tread lightly, her heart wrapped in metaphorical bubble wrap. Faith's Nairobi landing. Come Thursday, Faith touched down in Nairobi with the timing of a star making a grand entrance. She camped out at Diane's office reception, probably practicing her patient waiting face. Once Diane wrapped up her day, they reunited and embarked on their great escape from the office, navigating through traffic with Diane's secret shortcuts, turning their commute into an urban safari adventure. When Faith arrived at Diane's place, she was shown to her usual room, which, let's be honest, had seen more of Faith's belongings than Diane's vacuum cleaner in recent months. After unpacking and somehow managing to turn a quick refresh into a mini spa session, Faith wandered into the kitchen. There, Diane was embarking on the culinary adventure of making chicken stir-fry, a dish chosen for its complex balance of being both food and not requiring a culinary degree to prepare. Diane, ever the hostess with the mostest, insisted Faith go prepare for her interview while she tackled the stir-fry, which, between you and me, was really just an excuse to avoid Faith's well-meaning but chaotic kitchen help. It's a simple recipe, Diane claimed, a phrase that, in roommate speak, means I've got this, and please don't ask to help unless you can do so telepathically. Post-dinner, the living room transformed into a makeshift interview prep area.